All right, here we go. We've got the spinning circle. We're moving. That means we're live for another Money Moves. Happy Tuesday, everybody, and welcome back. For those of you that are watching us live, thank you for that. And be sure to click that little subscribe and like button down here. And for those of you catching us on a replay, welcome. We're glad you're here too. If you want to get all of our videos, past and future, go to www.blackswanmoney.com, and that is our YouTube channel. And you can actually subscribe there. Click that little bell icon, and you'll be alerted to when we are posting new videos and doing some live. So, Wendy, as always, it's fantastic to see you. And we've got a very exciting conversation today. What are we talking about today, Wendy?
Talking about your kids and when to cut them off.
So, yeah, that's it. Gen Z and the boomerang generation. So for the first time in 160 years, kids are actually staying at home longer. So we're going to talk about that in just a few seconds. So if you've got kids or know somebody with kids, especially those Gen Zers, man, wow. I'm just teasing. Get them on here. Tell them, hey, they're getting ready to get started. Share this. Share the post video, and we'll get started in just a few seconds. So let's start. We almost should have played that Who song, My Generation, right? Because we're talking about that, today. So we've got obviously generational impact on the economy and things like that in your personal pocketbook happens with each generation. We had the silent generation, which, those are the folks that are born pre-World War II and during World War II. Then we had the boomers that started right after World War II, 46 to 84, 64. And they had the biggest, and there were so many of them, right? All these guys were overseas, and ladies too, don't get me wrong. And, they were alone for a while, so they came back and, hey, turn on some Barry White and got it on like Donkey Kong, right? So this massive wave of children called the baby boom came through, and they've impacted a lot of things, both politically as well as economically and things like that. And then what I think personally, the best generation ever to exist in mankind came along, and that is Generation X. We were the latchkey kids, the ones that were pretty much feral. We raised ourselves. I know I was cooking my own meals by the age of 5 because that was 2-income households, things like that. You're Gen X as well, correct?
I'm right on the brink. It depends on which article you read.
That's right. It's 65 to 80, 82, somewhere in there. So you're an 80 baby. So yeah, that's right. Then you have the millennials. Just going to mention it and just move on. And then we have Gen Z. No, I'm just kidding. We got a lot of millennial fans that watch us too. So we love you. We love you. And then the Generation Z. And then the new one that I just found out about, which is Gen Alpha, which is basically about 2013 to date. So there's, a decade of Gen Alphas out there too. But today we're going to talk about Generation Z for a couple of reasons. Number one, those are the adults that are coming into scene right now, graduating college and whatnot, as well as some, very, very young millennials would fall into this category too. I have 3 kids. They're all Gen Z. You have a number of children.
5 of them are Gen Z.
So there you go. So it gives us a little bit of background and expertise on Gen Z, so to speak. So we're actually going to talk about, the financial impact that they're having. And, we had a conversation with a client actually earlier this week last week. And that was one of the things that came up. They were struggling financially because not only are they trying to support themselves and play catch up on their retirement planning, wealth building, they're also supporting those boomerang kids and, kind of helping them out as well. And they're not alone. I started thinking about that. Yeah, I just spoke to a client the previous week where they're still sending money to their children, and it's really having a significant financial impact on them as well. Trying to assess, hey, what's going on and what can I do about it? So we wanted to talk about that today, what you can do and some of the things that we're seeing and what you need to do in order to stop the financial hemorrhaging, so to speak. And I'm not talking about throw your kids out on the street, although some parents, may do that. But how do you stop that bleeding? And what you need to have if you're, younger parents and you have some of those Gen Alphas coming out, having those conversations early with your children to kind of set the stage, set the expectations. You had a great, story you were talking about earlier with your son, I believe. And so, that's what we want to talk about that today. The boomerang children, how they're affecting you coming back. Like I said, New York Times has had an article where it's actually the first time in 160 years that families in the USA are starting to grow. And I'm not talking about having more children. I'm talking about having children move back into the home after they've gone away to school. And now they're, typically mounted with financial student loan debt and things like that. So it's not a good situation. So
yeah.
Go.
Well, so I've got in fact, he's calling me right now, my oldest, probably asking me for money. No, I'm just kidding. But my oldest is 21 in college. And I was telling John earlier, my big thing is I didn't have the right conversations early enough. Mm-hmm. And, I had 2 kids young and I thought that was going to be it. And so I promised my kids the whole stinking world, in my young ignorance and thinking that life and money and everything's going to be easy and that I would only have 2. And then I have 6. So life gets a lot more expensive as you continue to add the children and sports and all of that. And so it's been a struggle with my oldest because I set expectations of what he would get from me. And I've had to change some of those. Right. And it's caused a little bit of, strife a little bit. Mm-hmm. And, he goes back to when I was, you always said, and so I think it's really important, especially me now, my youngest 2 are, 12, 11 and the youngest 3, 12, 11 and 6. And so having those conversations, that are appropriate on what to expect, because I feel like you've got to start having those conversations around like middle school, because by the time you get, a couple years after that, they're getting a car. And so, my parents, I grew up with kind of like, I worked from the time I was 14. I never expected, I wanted a car. They bought me like a $1,200 Volkswagen Fox, right? Like I got like the crappiest car.
I remember those. Yeah, I remember those.
And so I had, it was like a crappy car. I paid for my gas. I worked. I never didn't work. I worked through my school years and everything. And so, and then it's been interesting, with my Gen Y kiddos that are now adults. And it's been hard to transition. Okay, when do the cell phones, when are they your responsibility? When's the car insurance your responsibility? When's the, they always pay for the gas. When I have one living with me, he just started paying me rent. And so I'm like, and that was like a conversation we had to have. You can't just live with me forever. Rent. So anyway, a lot to think about with school, with college, right? Who's paying for college? Is that all coming from,
well, that's, and that's the big piece right there. I was raised, we didn't have a lot of money. So it was pretty much, hey, if you want something, you got to go out and mow yards, whatever, to get what you can. Right. And I think so many parents, they do it with the best intention. Like, man, my dad did this, or my mom did that. I'll never do that to my kids, right? Well, what happens, though, is if you don't watch yourself with that, you end up taking away huge learning experiences for your children. And you do it for your kids. And we've all heard of the term helicopter mom. And I guess it can be helicopter parent, where they're like protecting, and you see that more and more in our schools. Something happens at school. Well, now the parents come in, threaten lawsuits and stuff like that. So everybody's backing off. And now look at the system, our public school system. It's in, utter shambles right now because there's so much fear of reprisals from parents and things like that. Where in my day, I remember getting spanked by Mrs. Griffith in the 5th grade. She had a big old paddle and I screwed up. And, myself and this other kid named Art, she waited till everybody got in the classroom, pulled us up front, and it was corporal punishment time. And that wasn't the bad part, because the bad part was knowing what I was going to get going home. Yeah. And, and that doesn't really tie to today, but because of that, I went out and I learned the value of money. I learned the value of hard work, and I learned what it took to buy stuff, and I took care of that stuff much better. Well, flash forward, and, I live in a really nice neighborhood, and I see kids cruising around on golf carts and stuff like this. That's a false reality for them. That is a false reality for them, because the world, if you make it too artificial, the real world is not like that.
Mm.
And so what happens, they go out into the real world and realize, oh, it's expensive.
Life is
Oh, I can't just say whatever I want. I actually got punched in the face for that, or whatever the case may be, right? And so what do? They don't like that. So they want to come back to that bubble that you created. And so you as a parent have kind of created your own problem. I mean, when you talk about, I sat down with all my kids when they were going into high school and say, okay, what do you guys want to do? Have you thought about college? Because my personal thing, I was raised that, man, college, you've made it and this, that. I don't believe that anymore. College has become a business. They need to bring back trade schools and make that just as important, because it is. And you can make six-figure incomes being a plumber, welder, whatever the case may be. And we have turned that into like, oh, no, I guarantee I wish I knew a lot of stuff, that I don't know now because of the college thing. But anyway, but I told everyone, I said, look, I've got college for 3 of you. Mm-hmm. And, I was in a situation where I had to pay for my own. And I did. I waited tables in college, got scholarships and stuff like that. And my parents didn't contribute at all. On the other side, my spouse, they paid for everything. Gave her a credit card, bought her cars, stuff like that. And she's like, well, that's what we're going to do, right? And I'm like, no, we're not. And so you've got to, number one, have that discussion with your partner on the finances and make sure you're on the same page and in agreement, or else one is undermining the other, right? And that's not good for a long-term relationship. And the second thing was, they've got to have some skin in the game, because if they have skin in the game, they realize and recognize the value. So when it came to college, I told each of them, look, I'm going to pay for 50%. You've got to figure out a way to pay for the other. Either that's through scholarships, work, whatever the case may be, start saving money now. And so oddly enough, they did. My first one just graduated last year. And how did he pay for his other half? Scholarships, worked. And he had a little bit of student loans, but he walked out with a 4-year degree, having less than $20,000 in student loans.
Nice.
I could not have been more proud of him. And he's got a 4-year degree, and and he's using it. So to me, that was awesome. Same thing with my second child, right? My daughter, she's halfway through. I think she's got maybe $8,000 in student loans total. She's done the sorority thing, paid. She's working side hustles during breaks and stuff like that. And I'm teaching her the entrepreneur route. And my youngest son actually just got a full athletic scholarship to a great university in another state. So he's going out of state. It literally just took him last week to go do that. So they recognize the value of it, and it doesn't put the parents in a financial situation. And they know the value of the money, because my son that graduated, he's already out. He's out on his own, got an apartment. He's got a roommate, right? And that's what I did. I mean, I couldn't afford a place when I first moved out on my own. So what did I do? I got 2 roommates, found a 3-bedroom apartment. We each got our own room, and, oh, you got the master, so you're going to pay a little extra, right? And that's how it worked.
Yep. Well, and what I feel like what I know I see a lot of with my kids and their friends, my older kids, is the ones that were handed everything, right? They're sitting at home playing video games, not doing stinking anything. And then the ones that didn't have everything handed to them are out there working, making their money. And with the exception of one kid I can think of who was handed everything and still works harder than anybody. He's and
that does happen. And maybe that's, if you're watching this going, well, my kids aren't like, maybe that's your kid, right?
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, that's not the norm.
It's not the norm. Right. Right. And so, yeah, I'm committed. I've actually learned a lot by hearing you talk about your kids and the things that you've done. And I'm like, I need to do much better. And I've done better, like with my Malachi, who's almost 18. And he's like, he doesn't just want to work for his own money, but he's like, I want to work and help with family stuff and buying groceries, And my Matthew, he goes out and, buys groceries for all the kids, for the whole house, and says, thanks, Mom, for letting me be here, and pays rent now. And so it's nice to see them gain that responsibility, start doing those things. Because the truth is they need to understand how money works too. Yeah. And it's not just like, saying, here's what you're responsible for, here's what you're not. But then also we're doing a planning meeting, Matthew and I, next week, because he's been making really good money. And, he's kind of like at first in that phase of like, oh, buy this, buy that. And so we're going to sit down and create a budget and start to hand over, responsibilities that
Mhm.
that parents are still paying for. So,
Well, and that's the thing. And folks, what I'm not saying is, hey, once they're out, they're out, they're on their own or whatever. I mean, you don't want your kids to be homeless. You don't want to have to turn to, OnlyFans or whatever to make money. And I'm not judging people if you do that. God bless you. Right. But, it's one of those things that unless you teach them, number one, set the expectations and they understand that, hey, eventually you're going to be on your own.
mhm.
They're never going to be. And by you continue to support them, one of the clients we were talking to today, or last week, excuse me, she made a comment that, their financial situation, she really needs to get a full-time job, but she can't because she's watching her granddaughter for her, her kids, her adult, child and their sibling or spouse. And I'm like, okay, well, so you're going to forego your financial independence and because of that. I said, my suggestion, and you do what you want to do, but you need to have a conversation with them because they're living in a false reality right now. You're taking away a problem that they need to solve.
Mm.
But by you doing it for them, even though they're adult children, it's creating a financial hardship, not only for them, because they're not trying to figure out ways to pay for this extra childcare. It's creating it for you because now you can't catch up on your financial contributions to get to your financial goals in order to be retired. So you're basically never going to be able to retire because you're making that decision. And I get it. And I'm not saying cut a cold turkey or whatever, but figure out a way to make that conversation. And eventually those adult children need to move on and be able to support themselves. It's mother nature, right? The birds in the nest, right? Eventually those birds are bumped out of that nest because they need to know how to go out and fly on their own and fend for themselves. And they can still have that family support network. Now, on the flip side, if you're, non-traditional, and I guess a extreme traditional American where you've got it multiple generations under one roof, that's okay too. If that's your choice, not doing it because you have to. But if that's the case, do it. Wendy just talked about doing, okay, well, that's fine. You can stay under this roof, but you're going to contribute. Here's what you're going to contribute.
Mhm.
But I know eventually I wanted my freedom back as an adult, going in my retirement years and things like that, being able to have freedom of movement and whatnot. And when you've still got to support that extended family, you're never going to get there, period. End of story, right?
Yeah. So point is have those conversations with your kids. Have a plan yourself with you and the other parent and figure that out in advance, well in advance of kids getting to driving age, I think. Right? I mean, kids can work at 14, right? That's how it was when I was young. So I would
14,
say
15.
that, 11, 12 years old, that's, to start saying, okay, what are you going to what's that going to look like? And I know it's difficult. Like it is, kids that are in sports, my son Malachi, I'm like, you can't get a job because he plays literally one sport after another, but teaching them those, I know you with Ben doing those odd jobs and picking up those, mowing lawns on the weekend or whatever, finding the time that you can create some income for yourself. So,
well, it was in the off season, you work concessions at the local rec ballpark and stuff like that. So you're still around baseball and whatnot. I mean, again, it's not when they're coming up that they have to support themselves 100%, but you need to teach them the value of money. I mean, when we had birthdays, Christmas, they got gifts and our kids never really wanted for anything. But if they wanted that extra stuff, hey, that's great. Go find a job and pay for it. It wasn't mom or dad coming in and saying, hey, here you go. Don't worry about it. I'll get it for you. Right. And because of that, and I'm going to brag about my kids a little bit here, they all have turned out to be very frugal, not cheap, but frugal. They look for the deals. Right. And they take care of their stuff and they're responsible. And I look at some of the, the kids, and we've all seen them, right? They just expect mom and dad to take care of them. They expect X, Y, Z. And it's like, this entitlement mentality, this is where it comes from. It starts in the home. And what it does, though, it not only creates frustration for you as a parent, it creates financial frustration for you as a retiring adult, or I guess a not retiring adult. So huge financial impact. Not only that, you're enabling an environment that doesn't really exist for your children and taking away learning opportunities from them. And this almost seems like more of a parenting than financial, but they're both tied together, right? So have those conversations with your kids early, teach them about money, right? And, set the expectation of, hey, here's what's going to happen, but you're not living at home forever. And that way you can eventually have a nice retirement as well. and had not only be independent yourself, but have the financial wherewithal to do what you want to do. So that's all I've got. Wendy, I don't know if you want to add anything else to it.
That's it. I think
All
it's
right.
a conversation.
All right. Well, again, folks, your path, your journey, your decisions, but things to think about down the road. How are you going to be free, both money and in your life? So there you go, folks. Every Tuesday we're here. Give us a thumbs up if you like what we did. Love to hear your comments on what you're doing with your kids to help our community out, things like that. But make a comment, share the love, share the video, and we'll see you next week here on Money Moves.